Good afternoon to all of you. Nice to meet you. I would like to thank friends and supporters of the United National Anti-War Coalition and Afghan Women Nation, who this time invited me here to bring the message of the suffered and oppressed people of Afghanistan to justice-loving people of the US. And also my special thanks to supporters of Asian, American, and Asian diaspora studies of the Ethnic Studies Department and Department of English, who today organized this event and gave me this opportunity to talk about the ongoing tragedy in my country and about the realities of the so-called war on terror by US and NATO. And also thanks to Dear Hatem, who by this introduction, in fact, put more responsibility on my shoulder on behalf of my people to continue to this struggle more tireless together with my people against occupation and these extremist fundamentalists in my country. And today I represent a nation who, after 12 years of the so-called war on terror, still they suffer from the fascism of fundamentalism and imperialism of the US and NATO occupation. Besides condemning this disgusting war, I want to share the consequences of these sinister years with you, which were only more bloodshed, human rights violations, crimes, looting of our resources and changing of our country into a mafia state. As 7th of October was the 12th anniversary of the invasion of Afghanistan by US and NATO. And during these blood years, the occupation forces and these terrorist groups, they killed tens of thousands of innocent civilians, most of them women and children, as widespread poverty, destitution, and injustice have made life torture for millions of Afghans. And it is suffice to say that in the UN Human Development Index, Afghanistan is ranked at 175th position in the top 10 list of most underdeveloped countries. And it holds the first position in the corruption index, as you also may hear that Afghanistan is the second most corrupt country in the world. And around 20 million people out of estimated 27 million population of Afghanistan are living under the line of poverty. And during this 12 years, they have changed Afghanistan to the center of the drug in the world, as more than 90% of opium produced from Afghanistan, and even found its way on the streets of New York and Europe. And there's another report that around 2 million are addicted, and many of them are women and children. Later, I will show you as a tip of the iceberg some pictures too. And opium prices, another problem. Usually girls aged below 16, they are married off in exchange of opium if a farmer fails to supply opium to a warlord. And also, UNIFEM gave a report recently that Afghanistan is the worst place to be a woman. And many examples like this, according to the consequences of this 12 years of the so-called war on terror of US and NATO. As catastrophic situation of women was very good excuse for US and NATO to occupy our country. Even they misuse from the miseries of Afghan women. Then later again I will show you some pictures to tell you more about the catastrophic situation of the women during these 12 years. And although the Western media, they raise so much outcry about women's participation in the political life of Afghanistan, it is another big lie. Over 80% of women, they face some sort of violences, but there is a complete impunity for the perpetrators of such crimes. Even a woman MP named Nuzia Atmak, she had linked with these warlords, and now she forced to seek asylum from her abusing husband. And forced marriages, child bride, acid attacks, domestic violences, burning the girls' schools, cut the nose and ears of the woman, and different kind of violences against women are skyrocketing, raising more and more day by day. As recently, 16-year-old girl, her name was Shakila, she has been brutally raped and then killed by a member of the Provincial Council of Bamiyan Province, and 3 other parliamentarians now, they partner in this case in this crime, and they are going to forge the medical report of the raped girl. And even this mafia court that we have is going to end this case in the favor of these rapists. As now I'm working on this case that later I will tell you more about this case as a tip of the iceberg. And this is just few examples that I share with you, as usually these news never broadcast by mainstream media to justice-loving people around the world, or any brave journalist in Afghanistan make report about such crimes. They receive death threats or kidnap them or even kill them. And also the US and its allies during this 12 years, as I said earlier, that they killed tens of thousands of innocent people, that telling to our people, we are here to fight against Taliban or against these terrorists. But now they publicly they say to our people, US officials and these other Western government politicians, that Taliban is not their enemies. And they are right, at least on behalf of my people, this 10 years I was saying to brave people around the world that Taliban and the Warlords, all of these extremist fundamentalists are a product of the White House. And they are only the enemies of Afghan people, especially these unfortunate women, and not the enemy of their foreign master. As this 12 years, in fact, they played the game of Tom and Jerry with these terrorists. And now, under the name of national peace, reconciliation, invite these terrorists to join this puppet mafia regime. I believe this is just fun of peace, as peace never can by sworn enemies of peace, democracy, justice, especially in the way that we witnessed the role of these Northern Alliance fundamentalists as they impose on our people with the mask of democracy, who are running creed of the Taliban. And I believe that such kind of so-called peace is even more dangerous than Al-Qaeda in terrorism, as destroy the life of people more, as make more unite these enemies, the warlords and also the Taliban. And also that even recently in Qatar, you also may hear that they opened an office for these terrorists of the Stone Age. And people of the world, they should know that US and NATO is there for their own regional, strategic, economic, and political interests. And also, right now, the US and NATO only want peace for themselves, in expense of putting our people to more disasters through empowering these reactionary terrorists like Taliban and warlords. Sorry, earlier I was saying that such kind of peace is more dangerous than the terrorism. I mean that than the war, not terrorism. They are terrorists. Because this peace make more unite these terrorists, as will be more possible for them, easier to eliminate democratic-minded, progressive people of our country. And also you may hear that they are telling you they will leave Afghanistan by mid of 2014. And it's another big lie. Because from one hand they are talking about US permanent military bases there, from another hand they are talking about the withdrawal of their troops. As recently John Kerry was in Kabul, suddenly went and was talking about the so-called security agreement with American nation or Afghan nation. As this 12 years they committed crimes and in the name of American people, and trying to give bad view about Afghan people to great people around the world. And they are trying now to make legalize their military bases, as on 9 major military bases now they work there. And even they are talking about handing over responsibility to Afghan National Army and police. It's also another trick that they use these Afghan as cannon fodder to decrease the number of their own soldier casualties. Same like what they did in Vietnam War. Itself is enough to show the hypocrisy of the US government that, as I said earlier, this 12 years they were saying they are fighting against Taliban, now they invite Taliban, or they say we will leave Afghanistan, but in the meantime making legalize their military bases there. Even few thousands of the troops withdraw from Afghanistan, it will be also easier for them to control Afghanistan through their puppet regime and also military bases that they have, and going to give immunity to their soldiers. So I believe as long as there is US military presence in Afghanistan, we have no independence, and a country have no independence. Talking about democracy, human rights, peace, justice is a ridiculous joke. And that's why I believe the only solution for the catastrophic situation of Afghanistan is the withdrawal of all of these troops as soon as possible. If they leave Afghanistan today, is much better even than tomorrow, because the presence of these troops make much harder our struggle for justice and peace by empowering these reactionary terrorists, dark-minded forces like Taliban and Warlords. And also they are talking to you about the so-called free election in Afghanistan. As we experienced this 12 years, I believe was the most fraudulent and ridiculous election even in the world. And we have a famous saying, it's not important who is voting, it's important who is counting. That's our problem. As all the boxes during this 12 years was in the hands of these corrupt people, warlords who were in power. And they betrayed even the votes of these Afghans. As in the previous election, millions of Afghans, they boycott election, they did not attend. And I'm sure in this future election, in the few months presidential election that coming, again, millions of Afghans will not attend. And as our people use this famous saying, this proverb in Afghanistan, that the result of this election will be the same donkey but with different saddle. It means that Karzai will remove, but another Karzai will come in power, the one which US want. So election under the shadow of Afghan warlordism, drug lordism, awful corruption, and occupation forces has no legitimacy at all. And through these fraudulent elections, they want to give legitimacy to their mafia, parliament, or this regime that we have. And I will never be tired that from every audience on behalf of my people say to great people around the world that only the nation can liberate themselves. No nation can donate liberation to another nation. And if US and NATO stop arming these terrorists, then our people, they can fight against these medieval-minded, ignorant terrorists. As this 12 years, US and NATO, they shamelessly, they portray themselves as friends of Afghan people. And many of you know the history of the US government, as it has a long history of replacing democratic regimes with dictators. We have seen in the course of modern history that US government interfered in internal issues of tens of nations to suppress mass movements and block democratic-minded forces from coming to power in countries where US has only it is strategic and economic interest. For example, Iran, Chile, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Bolivia, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, these are just few of the many countries where US interferes, brought bloodshed, suffering, and tragedies to their people. So I'm afraid that the same will happen in the countries where the glorious uprising happened against these dictators in Arab countries. And also, if the leaders of these movements, they could not stop the dirty hands that are actively working to divert the people's right to the wrong and dangerous direction. As last example, I want to give you the example of the Egypt, that how US interfered after the uprising of the people. They supported these extremist fundamentalists there, the Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood, who come in power. And very soon, fortunately, we witnessed that how, again, justice-loving people of the Egypt stand up against these fundamentalists. Or we can say example of the Syria, that how now US government interfered in the internal issue of this country under the nice banners and support and giving weapons to the fundamentalists who are brother and creed of the Taliban and also these Al-Qaeda terrorists. As they change this country to the ashes, and the people will witness, the people of this country, the darker days as long as US and these other foreign countries interfere in their internal issues. And the brave protesters in these all third world countries, they must be aware of these facts and learn from the history of these other countries and nations. As always I say is that we see that today how imperialism and fundamentalism together, they join their hands trying to lead the world toward barbarism. We should fight against it, even if it happens in Iran, in Syria, in Libya, in Palestine or Iraq. Unfortunately, we are witnessing the glorious uprising of justice-loving people around the world, especially in the US, which shows the huge difference of the people of the US with their government, with their warmongers who are in power and waging this criminal war in countless countries. And as always, I said that U.S. has two faces for our people, and I'm sure for millions around the world. One is the dirty imperialist government of the U.S., another is the great people of the U.S., like Professor Chomsky's and many Chomsky's like you, who stand up against war and do struggle and try to join their hands with oppressed people in war-torn countries and occupied countries. Also, great people like Snowden, Manning, Mattis Schultz, Daniel Ellsberg, John Parker, Mike Prisoner, Joe Clinton, and hundreds and thousands of these other anti-war soldiers who are considered for their government as traitor, but they are heroes for millions, I'm sure, people around the world, and they live in the hearts of oppressed people of these countries. And from this opportunity, I want to send salutation to dear Manning and Snowden, who are so brave to expose the real criminals in Pentagon and White House in the heart of the U.S. And they played a big role in enlightening people around the world about the true brutal face of the U.S. imperialism. So the more such brave people are pressed by the U.S. administration, the more they will find their place in the hearts of the people, freedom-loving, justice-loving people around the world, as I said earlier. So they are my hero and also source of inspiration for my people. I don't want to take much of your time. I want to end my talk with a quote of dear Martin Luther King, who says the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. And thank you.